When did streaming go from a blessing to a curse? Do you remember when it used to feel liberating? All you knew was cable TV, long commercials, high prices, and all of a sudden you had this cheap alternative where you could watch whatever you wanted with no ads? Those days are long gone. Let's dive into why. Most people would agree that those days are long gone, and it has some collateral damage to go with it. If you remember when Netflix first started out, it was mostly just a DVD subscription. The company would send you out, I think it was 3 or 4 movies a week. You could choose whatever movies you wanted. They would send you the DVDs, and then you would send them back. Most people had this subscription because they were already moving away from Blockbuster and other movie rental stores. It put Netflix in a perfect position to be first to market for streaming. A lot of people were already subscribing to their DVD service, and now they're offering a streaming service where you could watch whatever you wanted. No need to mail DVDs back and forth, no need to even have a DVD player. All you needed was a smart TV, and devices like the Roku and the Fire Stick were already starting to come out, making it very cheap to convert old TVs into smart TVs. The year was 2010, and Netflix had just delivered their new streaming service to the world. For $7.99, you would have no advertisements, and you had a curated list of movies and TV shows that you could watch at any time as long as you had an internet connection. Around the same time, Hulu was gaining in popularity. This really was the two major players at the time, Netflix and Hulu. It was very easy to choose, and actually Hulu at the time had free things you could watch with ads, I believe, but a lot of it was behind the Hulu Plus paywall. It was also $7.99, and you got to watch whatever you wanted. And not long after that, Amazon started including its Prime Video service for all Prime customers, even existing customers. It was perfect because at the time, you would have to spend basically less than $10 each for Netflix and Hulu, and then most people already had a Prime subscription by this point, and they would get the Prime Video for free. This is what most people refer to as the golden era of streaming. There was a lot of content. All of it was basically compressed into 1 or 2 services. Netflix was clearly the king and was first to market. And as I said, prices were low and it was very accessible for everybody. So you had people cutting the cord. Companies in the cable business were losing tons of money. And in all reality, it was hurting theaters in a way, but it was also creating a new revenue source and shifting the entire industry at the time. You could argue as a natural replacement for companies like Blockbusters starting to go out of business. It gave people a place to watch movies after they were out of theaters without having to go somewhere to get a DVD. Anybody who lived through this time or remembers it knows that it was great. It was consumer friendly. There was really nothing to complain about other than the fact that things were changing so quickly. A lot of people didn't have really good internet by that time, so it kind of started accelerating that for a lot of people. But overall, people were saving money, they had more access to more content, and it really wasn't very confusing. Unfortunately, things didn't really stay that way. You can debate the timeline depending on your personal experience. For me, I would say it was about 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years of this great golden era of streaming when things felt awesome before things started to change. Now remember, Netflix was first to market, but they didn't have the advantage of being a pre-existing large company, whereas a company like Hulu was owned by NBC, Fox, and at this point, Disney. Amazon Prime is obviously owned by Amazon. You have massive companies that are already starting to encroach on the space. So Netflix changed strategies and they were making more original content. Here's the difference though. It was really good at first. In 2013, you had House of Cards, Orange is the New Black. A year later, you had BoJack Horseman and Marco Polo. A year after that, you had Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Narcos, Bloodline, and a year after that, Stranger Things, The Crown, Luke Cage. All of these shows were a must-watch at the time, and by no means is this a comprehensive list. This was a peak content era for Netflix. They weren't pumping out the quantity that they are now, but they were creating quality shows. And to Netflix's credit, it did work. They pretty much cemented themselves as a staple, as a streaming service that every household had to have. Companies like Hulu tried to do the same, and they did have some hits at the time. In 2016, we had 11/22/63. Now, I haven't talked about the show on the channel before, but it is amazing. It is a very, very good show, and I had high hopes for Hulu Originals, but as you're about to find out, the quality did not stay here. Now, you did have The Handmaid's Handmaid's Tale in 2017, and The Mindy Project a couple years earlier. But after that, good luck thinking of anything. Now, there have been a few like The Bear recently, but other than that, they have large gaps in between getting any type of hits, but they are constantly pumping them out, and most of them just disappear because they suck. And do you notice where the hits stop landing? It's around the time when the whole streaming arena is about to change. HBO comes out with their streaming service, HBO Now, which then became HBO Max, which then became Max, which now is HBO Max again. But when it came out, it was highly competitive. They had tons of movies, a lot of better movies than what Netflix was offering even at that time. You had all of Game of Thrones and many other hit series that were already staples to HBO but were now being provided through the streaming service. Then in 2019, something happened, something that changed everything. Disney Plus. For $6.99 a month, you had access to every Disney movie. Keep in mind leading up to this, if you're a Blu-ray collector, you know how difficult it was to get your hands on every Disney movie, for no other reason than the fact that they would create the scarcity themselves. They would do what's called vaulting their movies. They would do limited production runs of their Blu-ray discs or DVDs, and then you would not be able to buy that movie after unless you found it used. And this is after Disney also bought Marvel and Star Wars, so now you had this absolute juggernaut of a streaming service which included all the Star Wars movies, all the Marvel movies, and all the Disney catalog. It's basically a surefire plan. They have an absolutely loaded catalog, and you're paying $6.99 a month. It was absolutely nothing, and it had no ads. Despite there being saturation at this point, basically all of these streaming services were doing extremely well, with subscriber counts growing exponentially every single quarter. And no one could deny the convenience. You didn't have to go to the movie theater. You didn't have to go get a DVD. You didn't even need to have a DVD player anymore. And with there being 5 or 6 years of banger after banger coming out of Netflix and a couple coming from like Hulu and Prime Video, you basically had to have the services anyway to watch some of the best TV coming out at the time. But this is where they knew they had us. So this is the age of the not so consumer-friendly streaming market. Even if the prices stayed the same, it is significantly more difficult to watch everything that you want to watch. I haven't even mentioned half the streaming services like Apple TV, Paramount Plus, and Peacock that came out later on and started grabbing up IPs and content that used to be on services like Netflix or Hulu. Everyone wanted their piece of the pie, and what it turned into was a very difficult user experience that started to mimic cable, because you have to pay for so many different things to get everything you want to watch. And yes, there's the dreaded price creep. All those prices I mentioned to you earlier are like a dream in the wind, evaporated far away somewhere. Now, Netflix costs $15.49 for no ads. Hulu costs $18.99 for no ads. Prime Video has ads now, and I don't even know how to get rid of them. I probably have to pay more. Disney Plus is $9.99 with ads. Remember, it used to be $6.99 with no ads. Now it's $9.99 with ads and $15.99 for no ads. And what are we to do now that all our cables are cut, our DVD players are thrown away, all our DVDs have been sold, everything's gone, all we have is a Roku and 5 different tiles of streaming services that we pay monthly for? Well, the companies know it. Their prices go up and the content gets worse. And unfortunately, this is the state of affairs at the time. This is the market we created for ourselves. No one could have seen this coming, but maybe we all should have. Unfortunately, the consumers aren't the only losers though, at least with this market in particular. Something has shifted content-wise. Remember all those shows I mentioned earlier, like Orange is the New Black and BoJack Horseman? Yeah, they're not making shows like that anymore. The shift in strategy is obvious. Now, Netflix, Hulu, and pretty much all the other streaming companies are all doing the same thing. Shoot as much stuff at the wall, create a flood of content, and just see what sticks. And what does that mean for us? There is an impossible number of movies and TV shows coming out weekly. It is impossible to stay on top of, and 99% of them suck. The ratio here is not good. You still have a few hits like Wednesday on Netflix or like The Bear on Hulu, but it's literally in a sea of crap, and they know it because these shows don't ever get renewed. They're just on to make another crappy, low-budget reality show. Now, as I said, we suffer the immediate consequences of that. I look at it as I don't have access to the same level of content that I did, and yet I still feel like I need to have these streaming services to watch some of the old stuff I want to watch. But that's not the only repercussion of this. The other big loss we all suffer from this is from movies. Anybody that loves movies, I think, would agree with me. And I'm allowed to say this because I'm Gen Z. We're to blame, okay? We're partially to blame, at least. I think if you take Gen Z and mix it with the shitstorm of streaming, this is what you get. You get terrible content. I don't even think they should be called movies. Here's a perfect example, and it's not the most extreme example, but I think it's actually a more relevant one. Take a movie like Red Notice. From a Netflix perspective, it's very high budget, it's star-studded, and it has some of the biggest set pieces of any Netflix film. It's definitely one of the most ambitious. Now, this is going to be very subjective, and this is from my own personal experience. I couldn't find any objective study to cite for this, but I think most people would be able to see the pattern I'm seeing, or at least understand what I'm about to say. Now, I'm a little older Gen Z. My experience has been that people that are a little bit younger than me tend to like movies like Red Notice and don't understand why I absolutely hate it. Now, you could say that what's wrong with Red Notice? It's great that there's a company like Netflix that's producing big budget films, not part of a previous IP. There's totally an argument to be made for that, if it was a better movie. When I watch that movie, all I see is content. You don't need to be into film to see it. It looks like it's shot on an iPhone. For as much money as it costed, the effects are terrible. And I don't think anybody can argue with the idea that if you were in a movie theater watching Red Notice, you would notice that it's shit. It lacks depth, it lacks good writing, it lacks almost everything that makes a decent movie. Now, if I take it from the idea that I'm just sitting on my couch and putting on a dumb action flick, then I actually think it's okay. But this is the problem. Our standards have dropped and we don't even realize it. And it's not just my opinion. Don't take my word for it. I'm just some guy who loves movies too much. There was a study done on enjoying watching movies in a theater versus at home. This study goes on to basically support what I'm saying, that consumers perceive a movie differently at home versus the theater. While in the theater, there are absolutely no distractions, there's greater clarity of the picture and better sound, so it's easier for people to pay attention. It really doesn't take a study to figure this out, but it certainly is nice that there's some supporting evidence here for this. But you might be saying, so what? Who cares if a dumb Netflix movie gets put on Netflix? Because that's what it's intended for, to just be watched at home. And I totally agree with you. But here's the problem. Our standards have lowered and we don't even realize it. And you can see it in the box office numbers. Now, there's arguments to be made like, well, Marvel has really been kind of not doing great recently, just crapping the bed over and over again, and they keep losing money. And certain things like that, sure, they affect the box office. But they're projecting that the box office is literally not going to get back to pre-pandemic levels for a very long time. By making things more accessible, by making things of lower quality, all of these things combined, and then take the TikTok-obsessed Gen Z, slightly younger than me by the way, generation, and put all of that together, and this is what you get. I mean, have you noticed a pretty big shift in the fact that you can't really go see a comedy in the theater anymore, or a mid-budget film? Why release it there when you could do it on streaming? You don't have to pay all the money. You don't have to create as big of a risk for the studio. They just dump all of that on streaming, and they actually know, they have verifiable studies that people are willing to accept less because they're watching at home with their kids screaming in the background, their dog barking, and basically paying attention to their phone the entire time while the movie's playing. I'm gonna just start calling it phone movies. Movies intended to just be played while you're looking at your phone, because that's basically what's happening. And I think that's what was so nice about the movie theater. It's a place for, not only a place where you can focus, but a place for a shared experience with other people, other fans of what you're watching, or even people that are just trying to have a good time. It's a nice environment where you can focus on the movie. It's an art form, and what we're getting is McDonald's art shoved into our mouths for what used to be $7.99 a month now, but really is like $16, okay? For $16 a month, you're getting McDonald's fries shoved in your mouth, which kind of sounds good right now, I'll be honest, but you get my point. It's just content. Everything is content. It's meant to grab your attention while you're sitting at home and just be something that is not too complicated so that it can play in the background while you look at your phone, while you I don't know, feed your dog or something. People aren't even having kids anymore, so it's probably feeding your cat. I don't know. Now, this is a pretty negative video. It's pretty bleak out there, and unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Now, I do wonder if maybe I'm looking at it through a more negative lens, because it's not all bad. They do give a lot of indie filmmakers opportunities that probably they would not otherwise have. There have been some hits recently, or smaller animated shows that come onto Netflix where I'm not quite sure it would have made it any other way. But does the bad outweigh the good? It's hard to say. I think it's mostly bad, and I think it's very much negatively affected our content, or our movies, our shows, the things we all enjoy. And I do believe there is going to be a counterbalance at some point. I'm not saying that I think people should do this, but I do think that pirating is going to keep increasing because of the actually anti-consumer practices of a lot of streaming services at this point. I think that companies like Netflix are going to fizzle out because they've lost their first to market advantage, and in my opinion lost their way, and they're competing with massive trillion-dollar companies right now. And after all of these changes, as us, the movie lovers, the consumers, the only reason that these things exist, all I can hope is that things get better, the content gets better, the movies get better, and we get back to a place where we have some standards and a more consumer-friendly market. A lot of people refer to this as the streaming bubble, and once it pops, I'm very curious to see what changes. I want to thank you guys all for watching, for making it through this video. Please let me know down below what you think about this topic, because it is very interesting to me. I really appreciate it. We'll see ya.